Good afternoon. So there's good times to present and there's bad times to present. The bad time to present is just before lunch, just after lunch, and just before the end of the day. We're in that sweet spot somewhere in the middle where we're all nice and full and we want to take a nap. So feel free to take a nap. It won't bother me at all. Just ask the person next to you to take notes if that's what you're going to do. The title of this session is User Productivity Experiences. I didn't create that title. It was forced upon me. Basically what happened was that we weren't going to have this session. But we learned through the sign-up process that many of you had not been to a tech conference before, are coming just from 2012 or 2009, and this is your first chance to see AX or Dynamics 365 for operations. So what we wanted to do is we want to take a step back. In a lot of the other sessions, they're talking about a lot of high-level concepts, advanced implementations, and we haven't taken a breath to say, well, what is this, and what are some of the fundamentals? There's an American TV show called The Office, and there's a character in there, and he's famous for saying, I can't use these memes, they won't let me use them, so you have to visualize, where he says, at this point, I don't know who Al Gore is, and I'm afraid to ask. That's kind of where we are right here, where at this point there's some things in Dynamics for operations that I should know, but I'm kind of afraid to ask because everybody else seems to know that. That's what we're going to talk about here. But before we get too deep into it, I want to make sure you understand that I went around trying to meet as many of you as I could. I see people from all over the world coming to this tech conference. Please understand how much we appreciate you and how much you mean to us. A cell phone without an app is nothing. Dynamics without you guys is nothing. We need our customers, obviously. We need developers, and we need our partners. That collectively is Dynamics. I'm not Dynamics. We're Dynamics. Who am I? Well, my name is Todd LaFour. I work for Microsoft. I worked prior to that for a company called Great Plains Software. Worked on a product that became Dynamics, the very first Dynamics, back when it was called Project EB in 1990. So this, you may hear creaking up here. That's my bones. That's not actually the stage itself. So what I want you to know is that what I said is we're nothing without you. I mean that sincerely. My email's up there. If you have a question, a problem, idea, and anything that you want to talk about, send it to me. We'll get it to the right people if it's a question. We'll get it logged in the database if it's a suggestion. Or, sometimes the simplest ones, you could spend an hour trying to find it on the internet. Drop me a line. First thing I do in the morning is I check to see if there's any email from anybody not associated with Microsoft directly, and I try to get those answered. So go ahead and send me that. And this deck will be made available, but go ahead and write that down. TLEFOR@Microsoft.com. And let me know where you got the email address so I have some sort of context of where I met you. Sometimes I'll get some of that from a couple years later saying, remember we had that chat? Well, no, not really, because I'm kind of old, but I didn't mean... Did somebody have a question? I heard a murmur. Okay. So that's who I am. Now, again, we're going to talk a little bit fundamental. Let's go back 4 years, maybe 5. The crew of Dynamics had just finished shipping AX 2012, and we got into a room, and we said, use a word to describe your favorite software. And so we all came up with these different words. What would you use to describe your favorite software? Sometimes your favorite software, you use it a lot, but you don't really like the software. Facebook. There's a lot of software that I use every day that I learn the rules of it, but I think it's archaic and it's really problematic, Twitter. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to come up with some ways of describing software so that we could feel that way about Dynamics. And the one that really harped on me was somebody wrote down love. Can you love your ERP? I sure hope so. You're going to use your ERP in the morning for 4 hours. You're going to go to lunch. You're going to come back again. You're going to use it for another 4 hours. And hopefully that's all you use it during the day. We sure hope we can build software for you that you love. And so I started thinking way back when about what do I love about computers and what do the rest of us love about computers, the group that got together. And I remember, and I actually dug this up, when I was little I used to draw pictures of supercomputers. I hope some of you understand what that little reel-to-reel in the middle of there is. But to me, the promise of the future was these massive supercomputers. These computers could do anything, and you had these guys in white lab coats, and they had their punch cards, and they're using COBOL or something, and they had unlimited processing resources. And that's always been the dream, but it's been, well, yeah, I work in enterprise apps. I'm never going to have that dream. Well, guess what? That's not the dream anymore. That's the reality. That's what Azure is. Azure's a supercomputer for business. It has virtually unlimited processing power, at least as much processing power as you could possibly need. So, we talk about it being a supercomputer, but it's a premium supercomputer. It uses the premier cloud service on the planet, Azure, the premier database engine, SQL Server. Everybody uses the development tool Visual Studio. And it has integrations with the premier Office software on the planet, Office 365. Now, when you combine that with what we wanted to do, we wanted to join that party. We wanted to be part of that. But what we always also wanted to do is leverage the 20 years of business logic that's already out there. ISVs and all of our modules. How can we take that business logic and move that into the cloud? That was our challenge. And as part of that, remember I said these supercomputers, they had the guys in the lab coats. The techie engineer guys running this. We didn't want this to be a computer experience. Meaning something that was technical, something that you had to learn the rules of the software. So we took a long time and looked at our user interface, took a lot of feedback from you, and started designing a modern user interface that hides the technology. You don't need to know what's behind this thing. To the end user, it should be amazingly simple. And so this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to give a little overview of the cloud architecture. Then we're going to talk about the user experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophies behind what we do and how we do them. But I want to get away from slides, and we'll do a lot of hands-on so you can see the interaction of the software. So as I said before, we wanted to preserve as much business logic as possible. And to do that, we had to take the infrastructure that ran the business logic, migrate that to the cloud, and then separate it from the user interface. So we have a logical user interface and a logical back-end component. And so when we started, it was 2012, and for those of you in the room on 2009, this is similar. It was a Win32, the Win32 API, using .NET controls. We had a workspace, and then we had windows within the workspaces, and they communicated with the AOS via RPC. In D365, we rewrote every single control, even some of the bad stuff you don't like about it. We kept some of the bad stuff, if you will, because we needed that legacy behavior. So sometimes you'll say, well, that's the same, it worked in 2012, we don't like that. Well, what we're doing when we run into that is we preserve the backward behavior while introducing new behavior that is more desirable. So in those scenarios, we're going to continue to run, but we encourage you to move on to the new behavior. So a question I get a lot is, okay, I'm the 2012 guy. I've used AX. I know I haven't had a chance to really work a lot in the web. Does this mean I have to learn HTML? Does this mean I have to learn JavaScript? The answer is no, unless you're creating your own control. In that case, you can and should and will use HTML and JavaScript. So talking about the user interface. This is 2012, and we were enormously proud with this because all of our usability studies said that it's easy to learn your software. The learning curve is very, very shallow. It's not steep at all. People can learn this quickly. And part of the reason why they could learn it quickly is because we put a lot of familiar landmarks on here. You know, if you look at the action pane, when you look at it by itself, it's very informative and very rich. And things are structured in a way that was easy to see the navigation on the side, the secondary data on the right side. But then we learned, after a while, that people are telling us that absolutely this was easy to learn, but now that I've learned it, it's like walking down in a big city like New York, Times Square. It has all these lights. It has everything vying for your attention. Everything on this screen is, what is the subject of this screen? Kind of hard to tell. Everybody wants your attention. And so we said, okay, we want an easy learning curve, but can we have an easy learning curve while at the same time making the software a little streamlined and easier to use? This is what we ended up with. We took away a lot of the noise, realizing you don't need all those pictures to tell you what the function is. Maybe the first time you look at it, it's nice to have an association with the Excel logo, with the word Excel. That's a real good, it's a good landmark on the screen, and it's a real good association that helps you understand what's going on. But after you use it once or twice, you get it, and you don't need that noise anymore. So we took the noise away, and it's much easier to see the subject of this form is a list of data. So, well, what about the learning curve? What if I don't know those associations? Well, we decided that one way we can take care of that is by introducing task guides. With task guides, you actually can sit down, or we can sit down, and we can record the steps to complete an action, and then you can play it back, and it'll even stop in certain areas and allow the user to do input. So we create a bunch of task guides for you. You can create your own task guides. So the learning curve is taken care of with step-by-step instructions rather than a user interface that is always trying to grab your attention. So the architecture. So on the left, you see Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012. On the right, you see 365 for Operations. You can see at the lowest level, a lot of that remains unchanged, where we still use SQL Server, but in this case, we use Azure SQL. Still SQL Server, it's just hosted within Azure. And we've introduced Power BI integration. At the application layer, on the left-hand side, you see things that are familiar. On the right-hand side, we have the Azure Compute Engine. We have massive amounts of telemetry. The telemetry teaches us user behavior. We don't know what you typed in. We don't know who typed it in. We just know somebody entered a transaction on this form, and this is the path they took. That way we can understand which forms, how you're getting to the forms, how long you spent there, and we have no idea who you are, and we have no idea the data that you inputted. That's all taboo. We don't record that, but we know the actions that were taken. So we can, over time, learn the most popular uses of our product. So for example, if we've got a feature on a secondary form and we learn most people use it, well, we're going to move that over. We're going to make it simpler for you. So having massive amounts of telemetry like that helps us understand how our product's actually used. And the other thing that we did is the integration with the EOS is controlled by an O data layer. We completely rewrote that O data layer to be in a managed stack. And then on top of it, as you're learning now, we just introduced a CDS implementation. And we can we're not going to talk a lot about that here, but what that basically means is through the CDS, you've got common data models, so your integration is much simpler. Like I said, when you have a phone, your phone is pretty worthless without apps. Well, we feel that Dynamics is enhanced much more when it has a family of apps. So we're introducing Power Apps, which allows you to quickly make applications sitting on top of CDS that can perform common operations or simple operations. And of course, what we talked about before, the difference between the fundamental framework is Win32 based versus HTML5 based. So here's a little sample of what you do to create a Power App. You go to a portal, you pick the type of app you want to build, and you can actually, you're picking the connection here. There's going to be lots of different connectors. You can connect to different data sources. One of those would be Dynamics. When you select Dynamics, you're going to get a user interface. You pick an entity from there, and when you pick your entity, the form gets laid out for you. You can pick patterns and say, well, this is a data entry pattern, or this is a list pattern, and they'll be laid out for you. And of course, you can make your custom forms and pages after that, but fundamentally, it provides a good framework for you for building a quick application. Same thing with mobile. There's actually a presentation going on next door. I said that once in a presentation, and a bunch of people got out and left, so feel free if it's important to you. But the ability to make a mobile app from within Dynamics in a novel way. You create mobile experiences with no developer experience at all. You used task guides or task recorder to create the steps and say, these are the fields that I want, and it'll output an app for you. So reducing the complexity and access to information is very important. So inside of our application, we have this perceived hierarchy, and I don't know if this is easy to see. And certainly these slides will be made available after the event. And if for some reason you can't find them, send me an email. I'll be happy to send them to you. We start with the concept of a dashboard. It's the first thing that greets the user when he launches the system. The dashboard is a breakdown that allows modular access to your most common tasks, which of course are controlled by a thing called a workspace. Those of you who have seen AX Dynamics 365 for Operators before, you know what a workspace is. If you haven't, a workspace is a new concept. It's a form that contains the most common actions that you'll perform for that particular module. It has your common lists. It has summary information about how your business is doing. You can put BI controls on it, and has links to common actions. And then from the old school way back when you worked with an accounting system, you would think in terms of go to general ledger, go to accounts receivable, go to this transaction, look up customer. Well, that's not really how you think. That's a rule of the software. You really think in terms of, I have customers. And that's what we do. We present you with your customers, and then you can decide you can perform actions on a group of customers, and that's the list you see in the third tier, or I can select a customer within that list and perform actions on that single customer, taking you down to the individual forms. So some of the things that we did to increase navigation productivity or brought forward from AX 2012 are we maintained, you may not know this, maybe you do, early on in the development of AX 2012, we said, you know what, we're going to get rid of the nav pane. Was anybody here, did you see early releases of 2012 where we got rid of the nav pane? Yeah, that went over like a lead rock on a boat. They immediately came back because people liked the navigation pane on the left-hand side. But what we did is we enhanced the navigation pane and made it more useful while not getting in your way, and I'll give you a demo of that as well. We kept favorites, but we made it even more easy to use, and I'll show you that. And then we had something that we've been aching for, and that's search. You don't have to necessarily know the navigation path to get to a certain form. There's tasks we do all the time that are infrequent, or there's a number of them that are infrequent. I only have to do this every quarter. I only have to do this once a year. Where is that form? Is it system setup? Is it organizations? I can't. If you can remember part of it, you can just type it, and we'll give you a list of forms, and I'll demo that as well. So productivity. Another thing that we've been working on for a long time, and the feedback that we get and understand and agree with is, how can I type something in Bing or Google and it has the entire internet and it just pops right there? How is that possible? Well, they got some pretty big storage engines and pretty big lists of indexes that we don't have. And anytime we start building indexes like that, it costs more to run in the cloud. So what we're doing, but we appreciate the need for it, so we're focusing on indexes that you already have in a lookup for the primary key. So in a lookup, not all lookups, In a lookup, you can just start typing, and it'll start filtering while you type. The other thing that we're really excited about for a lot of reasons is something called the action search. A lot of times, again, there may be an action that's infrequent or it just is multiple clicks to get to and you do it frequently. You can just use an action search where you do a hotkey into the action search pane, you start typing the name of the action, and you can actually perform the action immediately. And then one of my personal favorites is personalization, where you can modify the screens to work exactly the way you need them to. All right, enough of this nonsense. Let's get on with some demos. Okay. Some of you have seen this. Many of you have seen this over the last few days, and it still says demo. There we go. Thank you. Few know the panic of not knowing why your screen isn't showing in front of a group of people. So this is what we call our dashboard. It's got fundamental navigation on top, and what you see listed here are a list of workspaces. But let's take a look at this bar at the top. This is called the navigation bar or nav bar, which you may or may not have seen since it's very new. Is the Operations tab. The Operations tab is your home button. No matter where you are in the system, you click that, you come back here. It's always nice to have a place where you can go home. That's your home button. Dynamics 365, if I click that, this is where you can start integrating with Dynamics by having your little apps. Like you have your apps on your phone. These are the little apps that integrate with Dynamics and can be populated by Power Apps. And then, of course, the Waffle, which is its formal name, contains a list to the other cloud-based applications from Microsoft that you want quick access to. On the right-hand side, you see the current company. To switch companies, I click on it, and I can either look up the company, or I can type the name of the company, and it'll switch company for me. And this is our friend, the form search. We talked before. I can't remember the name of the form. It had something with bank. So if I just see bank, you can see that it'll quickly pull up all forms that have the word bank in it. And inside there, you can see the path to that form. So if I click bank accounts, and it opens up, say, oh, you know what, that's not really the one I was looking for. So if I go back, you can see it still remembered that I was looking for bank, and it still has that result. Now, if it is the one that I want, I can click on it, and I can see it's cash management and bank accounts. I can come over to my nav pane. And of course, the nav pane is global navigation. This is where I come. This is our old friend where I can use to find any sort of data in hierarchical fashion. So if I go to cash and management and I can see bank accounts, it's the current one selected because that's where I am. I click that favorite button, and you can see it just got added to favorites right there. If I decide I don't want it there, I just click the star and it goes away. Simple as can be. A couple other things of note here. We get asked a lot, so I'll just include it in this presentation. Is, you know, this thing at the top, this Contoso Entertainment System, that's sort of your space. You can decide you want to put your own picture on there. I'll show you a quick way of doing that. So come down here. I actually have a... thought I heard somebody talking. So I'm just going down to legal entities. You can see I can scroll down here. I'm going to say I'm going to edit this page. So I put it in edit mode. Come down, you can see images. I'm going to say I want a banner. And then I say, I actually had this preloaded, so I'll save that. And I'll go to my home button, and I'll refresh. As you can see now, you can change that any way you want. Next to the form search, you'll see something that is called Message Center. So in 2009, 2012, we had this thing called the Infolog. The Infolog. The Infolog was terrible. And it's terrible because it interrupts you. It's a different window. It keeps track of all the messages you had before. So if you're in the middle of an operation, you're doing something, this Infolog pops up, you can see 5 messages. Which one is the latest message? Why am I being interrupted right now? We worked very hard to define scenarios where it's important to stop and interrupt you and say, wait a minute, you have to make a decision right now, versus, yep, something's going on here. You might fix it yourself and don't even have to notice us telling you about it. Or before you save, make sure you take care of this. So there's an interrupting and non-interrupting set of messages. Message Center is non-interrupting. And it's things not related to the current form. But since we are in the cloud, we have this massive supercomputer in the cloud, we can send processing tasks off to the cloud, and it can start working in the background. Sometimes some of those tasks can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, several hours. So while you're doing data entry, you don't want to be stopped with a dialogue that proudly says, done. Don't interrupt me. Let me finish what I'm doing. Send a message in the message center, sort of like an email. It says, you have a message. Go ahead and take a look at it when you have a chance. There might be some issues. There might not be some issues. Either way, we're not going to interrupt you for something like that. That's what Message Center is for. And the next one is one of my favorites. It's the feedback button. Completely anonymous. Please don't type anything in there that is an email address or anything else that can identify you, because when we come across those, we delete them. We don't want to know who's telling us these things. It's completely anonymous. So give us your feedback, good, bad, indifferent. If you're frustrated about something, explain what you're frustrated about. We can't contact you here. There's a support button if you want support help. But tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like. It's easier sometimes to tell us what you didn't like, but telling us what you do like may prevent us from changing it in the future because we're not getting feedback on it. So give us both kinds of feedback. So the other thing about telemetry, like I said, we don't know who you are, but when you click that feedback button, sometimes what we'll do is say, what was that person doing 10 minutes prior to deciding to give us feedback? And that sometimes will help us understand, oh, I get it. They think it's supposed to work this way. We didn't do a very good job of communicating that, and they're trying to do it the other way. That's what telemetry helps us. And that's how we solve some of these problems. Now we have the little settings gear. And here we have user options. Under user options, there's lots and lots of different themes, including a black and white theme. A black and white theme is important for some users who can't see color or can't see different shades of color. Now, of course, there's high contrast in the operating system, but sometimes they don't want to go that far. Sometimes the user may be in the middle. We're trying to accommodate all types of visual impairments. And so we have the full Windows-based high contrast, and this is sort of high contrast light, where it doesn't give you a lot of noise, color noise. So you can quickly just pick a color theme, and it changes immediately. And then we have size, or what is sometimes referred to as density. Do you like your information packed in, or do you want it spread out? And so you can decide how you want your layout. And if you click that, it'll change that immediately as well. So I say, I want a little more information on my screens, so I'll just pick that. Another thing that we introduced in Dynamics for Operations is the ability to set regional settings. Previously, we'd allow you to pick your language that all your labels are in, but the formatting of your numbers, the formatting of your dates, we would get from the operating system. Well, we realize now that when you're in the cloud, we don't want to require you to set your phone, your tablet, your laptop, your desktop, whatever device you're using with a special format so you can see your financial information in a certain format. Because there are times that I've met a couple people here who, for example, work in California, but work for a company in Chicago. So the time zone may be different, and it's your personal laptop maybe, it's your personal tablet device. You don't want to set the time zone for your business on your device. So we separate that. And you can set your regional settings right here. You just pick, what region you want your information displayed in. I'm too chicken to change it, but English US. And then you can pick your time zone here as well. So it's a time zone for you as a user of the system, not the time zone necessarily where you physically are located. Sometimes if you're based in California but working for Chicago, you prefer to see the information in Chicago's time zone so that you can understand and communicate better over the phone with somebody in your home office. Now, all of our dates and times are stored in UTC time, so there is an absolute time. We're just showing you the relative value of those things, so don't worry about mismatching times or anything. So I click my home button, I'm back again with my new color theme. So the next thing I want to talk about is the workspaces. So if I click a workspace from my dashboard, you can see that I have a number of informational tiles on the left. You know what, because there's people in the back here, I'm going to change that. I don't like the purple. Let's make it a little easier to see. Let's give it a little lighter color there. There, is that a little easier to see, or is that worse? I can see it better. Okay, so there we have informational summary tiles on the left. For example, there are 3 partially shipped orders, and one of the questions you may have is, as of when? Well, these tiles are set up. There's a little question mark in the corner here. You can see that if you click it, it tells you when it was last updated and when it's next scheduled to be updated, or you can update it immediately if you don't trust it and don't think it's right. What we do is we run these background tasks that'll get the latest value, and we've got this cache of values. Those values are cached, and this thing will talk to that. So it's not going to impact the loading of the form. It's just going to do it once it's loaded. And of course, these lists are things that we've talked to a lot of people performing the specific tasks. Which lists are important to you? Which do you interact with the most? We get feedback from telemetry that says these are the lists that people use most, so we put them here. We're not going to be perfect. Actually, we're probably only about 25% right most of the time, and I'm going to show you how to add your own lists on here as well. Then on the right-hand side, and all the workspaces are laid out the same way. On the right-hand side, you can see that there's quick links to certain actions that are commonly done for this particular type of user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click down and I'm going to see, now here's a list of all customers. Did I click it? I didn't click it. So here's a list of all customers, and again, I changed the density. I didn't appreciate that it might be harder to see in back, so I'm going to change that density back again. There we go. Now, there's a few differences between the way 2012 worked in a grid and the way Dynamics 365 for operations works in a grid. Most specifically, instead of right-click go to main table, we've got hyperlinks, as you'd expect in a web browser or a web app. And so what we've done is we allow you to click anywhere in the row to select the row without hyperlinking, except for the primary key. If you click right here, it's going to navigate. But you can see that if I click on Contoso, we're assuming you're just trying to select the row because the primary action is not to navigate. The primary action is to just select the row. Is there a question? Okay. But if you do want to navigate once the row is selected, then I can click on it because it is a hyperlink. But note, I can click anywhere in that cell and it won't navigate because this part of the cell is not the hyperlink. The hyperlink is the hyperlink. Yes, sir? Does that work anywhere throughout the app that the go-to-main table would have worked in 2009 as well? Absolutely. The left-hand column is what we call go-to-main table. The other links, which is right-clicked, are done through form refs. So if you're a developer, you'll understand that. If not, we can talk afterwards and we can explain a little further. But all those things, as you model them, become hyperlinks. Actually, the primary key on a grid is implemented with a default action. And again, we can talk more about that after the session. So we talked a little bit about the user doing data input and not being interrupted or being interrupted. And so what we do here, if I were to go into edit mode, I'm going to change the customer group to an invalid value. And I'm going to tab off, and I'm going to type another thing, and I tab off. Note, it didn't stop me. It didn't throw me back into the control. It says, wait, you cannot leave until you answer this correctly. That's a model we used in 2012. And then that info log would come up in a separate window, and then now you've completely lost your train of thought. Sometimes you just transpose a number. Sometimes you type in a character when you meant a number. We don't want to stop your train of thought. We want to keep you productive, let you type it, and correct it in your own time. So as you can see, if I keep tabbing through here, we've also got an auto-save model. You don't have to click the save button, but there's a save button there if you feel like you need to save, like you need to walk away for a minute and you're not sure if things have been persisted. We'll auto-save when you cross a save boundary. A save boundary is where I've got many times these forms are based on different data sources. As soon as you go from one data source to another one, that one is auto-saved and you move on. So as I tab through here, you're going to see I'm going to cross a save boundary, and that's the time when it says, wait a minute, you want me to move on, but I can't. I can't move on until I save this data source. You're going to get an error message, and that's interrupting you, saying you have to make a decision. You have to fix the problem now. And that's where you can go back to the message bar, which contains, if I can click correctly, go to the message bar, which contains messages related to this form. You're not going to see things in a message bar related to something else that's going on in the system. So I can correct those, or I can come here under Options, and I can simply say Revert. And all my changes that I had made before are just rolled back. No harm, no foul. I'm going to quickly move to another form. There's another type of messaging. You know, we talked about message center. We talked about the message bar, and you saw the interrupting dialogue. There's one more. Remember when I said that there's sometimes some tasks will go off and spend hours, and then they'll come back? Well, sometimes they've got more than one error. And we're not going to put them in a message center. Instead, we put them in what we call in the side pane. And I've got a little task here that I've got saved I can show you. So if I go to compensation processes, and this is an HR task where I'm going to run, what is it? Annual salary compensation process. I don't even know what it is. But I say, okay, I'm going to run this process. This process is obviously not running on the local machine. It goes off into the cloud. It's running in the cloud. It comes back with a result set. And you notice before, when I was doing validation on data input, I got a yellow bar and a little warning symbol. Now I have a, let's call it a salmon bar with a little X in it. That tells me the level of issue. There's a green, there's a yellow, and there's a red. Red means in a batch result, at least one of the warning messages in that batch result was an error. So if you get a batch result and it's green, you don't even need to look if you don't want to. If it's yellow, you can look, but you don't have to. If it's red, you got to look because it failed. So I come over here on the bar, you see there's this thing called message details. If I click on message details, the aside pane will open up and shows me this is the result of the batch. Now this is very similar to what we did in the info log before. And if you're a developer, you'll understand that this is using set prefix. The same set prefix API that you used before is now working here. So we're backward compatible where you needed that batch result. That's where the info log was a good thing, when you had a batch set and you could see them in a tree. But the problem, that irked me was that it would intermingle it with other type of messages. We've separated those messages. We call it deterministic messaging. So, and there's lots of documentation out on AX Help about that. So here you can see if I scroll down here, there's lots and lots of results. I just happen to know towards the end here, you're going to see at least one error message. See, these are, you can see the little informational thing. Just informational, no problem there. But at least one of them got an error. I thought it was, yeah, there it is. Here's one that had an error. One fail, all fail. And so you get the message bar. turning red. If that red one wasn't there, this would probably be yellow or green. Let's go back home. Another request we got quite often in the web world is the ability to open up multiple windows. Well, you can do that. You can open up multiple windows and you can do things side by side. That's one of the benefits. You're not an MDI interface anymore. But the problem is what you wanted, was the ability to synchronize those two things. I'm going to show you how you do that. So I'll go back to my saved window. If I can get a mouse that's not so busy. I'm going to go all purchase orders. And I'm going to select a purchase order. I happen to know one that's a good candidate, I think was 16. Okay, so I've selected a purchase order. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under inventory and I'm going to say that I want to look at the transactions for that particular item. So these, I actually wanted to see the item in the transactions we had for that item. So what I do is I have no comment. I click on this pop-out window, and you can see, watch the window underneath. The window underneath navigated back to be the parent of this child. So if I use Windows 10 to bang that over there, and I put this over here. Now watch what happens when I click on that inventory item. Now I can see all the transactions on the right, and now I can navigate and understand better the transactions for the type of inventory item that I've ordered. So we got lots and lots of feedback, and we always do, and about filtering or finding information. What good is your financial product if you can't get at the information in a simple way? And there's lots of ways that people learn to use it in AX 2012, and they had some good ways, but we think we improved it by integrating the most simple things we can think of that are common across a couple other applications. So, for example, if I wanted to filter, by customer group, I just type 30. It says, what are you filtering by? I'm filtering by customer group, so show me everybody that's in group 30. Well, I actually want to know customers whose, let's see. I can also do more detailed filtering by clicking on the filter pane. It slides over and gives me more filter capabilities. Very powerful filtering, including filtering by a field that isn't visible on the form. And I can pick a field like this. I can say I'm going off script here. Let's see if I can figure out something here. Let's see. Never go off script. Let's say I want to filter by cash discount. Now, I don't know a good value for cash discount. Oops, I accidentally hit reset. When I reset, notice that my customer group filter went away as well, because this reset is a global reset. So I'm going to pick cash discount. I don't know what a good cash discount is, so I'm going to do a little personalization here. I'm going to give you a little peek to personalization. What I'm going to say is I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to say Personalize this form. I want to add the cash discount field to my grid. So I'm going to click on, who remembers personalization in 2012? How many of you want to throw a rock at me right now because of personalization in 2012? Okay, just one. Thank you, sir. The reason for that is when you personalize in 2012, what would happen is a window would open up and it would show you a tree view of the elements on that form. I'm going to say that again. A tree view of the elements on that form. So if you're in a group that you didn't even know existed because it's not visible in the user interface, you'd have to find that group and find things inside it and then decide to manipulate it that way. We got the opportunity to start from scratch. We threw all that code away and said, how do we want this to work? We want it to work as simple as possible. So we took a metaphor from like a paint program. It says you use a tool and you paint the screen or you modify the screen. So the first tool here is just a pointer tool. I can point to an object and it'll tell me about its properties. This is the move tool. I select it and I can move things on the screen. So if I take this, I can actually decide that I want customer group moved over here. So all I do is drag it and move customer group over. This is the hide field, or the hide control. So if I don't use invoice account, I just click on it using the hide control, and you can see that its visual changes. It says, okay, this is now a hidden field. It doesn't hide it right this second so that it's not confusing that things disappear. But when I leave customization or personalization, you'll see that field move away. This is summary control, which means we have fast tabs that have summary values on the right-hand side. It'll be over here for you. This is how you get those values up into your fast tab. Skip. If you've got a field, you want rapid data entry, you don't want it to be part of the tab sequence, skip this field. We never enter it, or we enter it very seldom. This is the read-write tool. This field is always imported from a different system, so I don't want my users entering a value in there, so I'm going to make it read-only. You'll use this tool to do that. And of course, this one where I add a field. So I click Add a Field, and then I have to tell it where I want to add, and I say I want to add it to the grid. When I do that, it goes and finds the data source for the grid and says, here are the fields that you can add to the grid. Now, unlike 2012, we don't let you add fields that are Dynalinked or are secondarily retrieved through business logic. A lot of times we allowed it to happen, and it sometimes would work and sometimes wouldn't work, because it depends upon where you are on the form whether or not that data got queried. So we only allow you the first level link data sources. So let's pick cash discount. And click Insert. And now you'll see at the right-hand side of this grid, I now have cash discount. And I say I have two more fields here. I don't want those fields, so I'm going to pick my hide tool. I'm going to say I'm going to hide extension. Oops, scrolled over on me. I'm going to hide extension. And I'm going to hide is merged. And then I'm going to take my move tool and I come over to cash discount. And notice when I switch tools, my hidden fields disappeared. If I click the hide tool again, they reappear to show you that you can show them again. But when I click my move tool, they go away. So I'm going to grab my cash discount, and I'm going to move it right there. There we go. And there. Now if I filter by cash discount, you can see I can say begins with 2, and I say apply. Now you can see I've filtered based on a field that wasn't there before, is now in the grid. I don't have to show the field to filter by it. I just want to show it to you to prove to you that it did the filter. So I can combine filters here. I can even go above the grid column, and you can see I have my sort controls, and I can filter specifically in this column if that's the way you want to do it. Let's see, filtering, personalization. Okay. Let's go back to my workspace for a minute. Yes, sir?
So do these personalizations, do they apply to all users or only yourself?
So I am personalizing for myself. If you wanted somebody else to have that same personalization, what you'd do is you'd come to personalize this form, and you'd say manage, and you'd say export. Today what we have is a document-based model where you share your personalizations by exporting that and handing it to the other user. They would import it, and then they'd get that personalization. Yes?
Can you personalize any form or just these list forms?
You can personalize any form that has decided to participate in personalization, which is 99% of the forms in the system. So I actually have some more personalization stuff to show you, and we'll cover that. Yes, ma'am? You can search by the field name you want to add, yes. The question was, can you search by the field name you want to add? Absolutely, yes, you can. Yes, sir?
2 questions.
Sure.
So I know you export your personalizations. Is it possible for it to like bundle up a set of personalizations?
I probably owe you some money because I was hoping somebody would ask that question. When we shipped Dynamics for Operations, we had simply a document model where if I have 15 users and they all want the same personalization, the only way to get it to them, because it was version 1 of the product, was to send an email with that document to 15 people and ask them to import it. Or the admin, from a personalization admin form, could do it 15 times. I'm running unreleased code, and I'm going to show you something that's going to ship that we haven't announced yet, that's going to ship with update 5. And it is the ability to pick a role or a group of users and say, give those users this personalization in one step. Thank you for asking the question. Sure.
Sorry, this is something that's been fixed in 2012 design with 2009 customers.
Okay.
How fragile are these personalizations? I.e., if somebody modifies the data structure of that, whatever you're just seeing on this.
Would a 10 cover it? Okay. So I was the program manager for this, and I went to roundtables, and I was like, you don't have to tell me how awful the user interface is. And defending 2009, 2012, very powerful, very functional, just not the easiest to use and understand. We wanted to take all that noise away and make it simple. The other thing we wanted to do is make sure that it works across upgrades. And so what we learned about the data structures that were used was that they were very broad. If you changed a form, and we changed things on the form, that personalization went away. We made personalization the lowest level of granularity we could, a property. So if somebody changed if we change a control but didn't change the property you modified, your personalization will still work. The only way your personalization doesn't work is if that property goes away or that control goes away. So we can ship an app update. We can move fields all the way around on the form. We can rearrange the form. But if that control is still there, your personalization wins.
And that's down to like the column personalization, so not the entire set of personalization.
Right.
Applied to your form.
Not just the column, a property on the column. So I'll show you later that I moved it, but you can also rename it if you wanted to. And so if we renamed it, your personalization still will work. And your personalization will go on top. And you've moved it because you come in last. We generate the form, we hand it there. If that control is still there, we might have moved it ourselves. In the original shipping one, it was here, it moved here. But you have it here? Nope, you get it. So your personalizations will span updates as long as the control is still there. In the back. Sure. You want to see all the records for that field? You want to see the actual data? What was the comment over here? Yes, record info. Yes, record info still exists. Same thing. I can do it afterwards. Okay, where was I? I wanted to go into, okay. So let's go back for a moment, and we'll do more personalizations. But let's go to, time check. Let's go to one of my dashboards, or my workspaces. So we talked about lists, and we decided out of the box which lists go here. That's probably correct 25% of the time because you all have your own jobs to do as end users. You all have the specific data you want on here. So as part of personalization, we wanted to introduce the ability for you to put your own list on here. Let's see, how would we do that? Well, I suppose we could, and we thought about this, and I'm giving you the thought process, we could slide a window out and you could build a query and you could figure out the data that you want to come in and put it on this list or on this form. I don't like it when our end users have to be SQL people. I don't like it when they have to build a query, and I don't like it when they think about tables or data sources or fields even. The way I think about this stuff is I say, my customer list. I just want my customer list just with customer group 30. Okay, well let's just, so where do you find your customer list? Well, right here in the all customers. You don't have to go someplace. There isn't 5 different places you find all customers. You come here to find all customers. Less complexity. I always come here. So if I come here and I say, I just want customers for a specific group, because those are the customers that I work with, I can now come up here. I've seen the filter. It's only customers from group 30. I can say, add to workspace. Which workspace? I type sales. That's the workspace I was working on. Now, do I want this customer list to be a number tile in the left-hand side, or do I want it actually to be a list on there? Well, I want it to be a list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select list. And if I say configure, now I'm going to get a slider that says, okay, which fields do you want to show in that list we're going to put on your workspace, and what do you want to call it? We'll call this Mary's customers. I click OK. Now when I close this window, I go back to my workspace and I refresh it. You'll see I now have clicked, I've added a list to my workspace that's Mary's customers with all those fields that I included. Further, I can now personalize this form, say, well, that's the most important one. I can say personalize this form. I grab my move tool. And oh, by the way, if I don't like this here, I can move that over. You say, well, that's where I want Mary's customers to show up, right there. Well, I also want to know, sometimes this list is real big, so I want Mary's customers to be on the left-hand side as a tile. Well, let's just do the same thing. Let me back up a minute. I meant to navigate a different way. Let's come here, and let me click on Mary's customers. And it takes me to that form, the all customers list. Slowly. Well, I'm just going to reapply it. So here's my all customers list with filtered to 30. Now I want it to be a tile. So I'll do the same thing. I'll say add to workspace, but instead of saying I want a list, say it's a tile. And it remembered which workspace I was working with. Do you want to show a count? What do you want to call it? I'll call it Mary's customers again. Let's go home. Let's go to that workspace. Now look on the side, you can see a tile that says Mary's customers. And there it is, with the total number of customers, which should match the number of customers in my list over here. We can take this one step further. I've showed you how to take a list, put it on a dashboard. I showed you how to put a tile on a dashboard. What if I wanted to see that value of 16 on my dashboard? We can do that too. One way to personalize something is just right-click on it and say personalize. Each object has a different set of properties that you can personalize for it. You don't have to bring the toolbar out if you don't want to. You can just personalize. You can say, I want to pin that value to the dashboard. That's all. Okay, it's pinned. I go to operations now. Now look at this workspace, or this dashboard, and the workspace for the one we're looking at. Sales order processing. There's Mary's customers, 16. We wanted to take the complexity out of using the system and making personalization as easy as we possibly could. Now, the first time you do that, it's kind of a thought process because there are rules about how to do it. But after that, now you're in charge of where your data shows using personalization. Question?
So, is it possible to export all your customizations? Did you just like one shot, I personalized all these forms, and I want to put back up?
We don't have that level of, the question is, can I just personalize, give all my personalizations? Like I'm an admin and I say, I'm going to set all this stuff up. You'll have to do it form by form right now. But it is possible to share them. So I promised a little more personalization demo on forms because I just did it on a list. So I'm just going to quickly navigate here. You see I clicked on Mary's list tile. Now I come to this form and it just shows it's already filtered to Mary's list. I can also drill down on a particular value. And let's say that for this particular customer, I usually do a sales order, but I'm going to hide fields and I'm going to move them around. I'm going to add summary. So I go into personalization mode. By options, personalize this form. Say I'm going to hide some fields. Let's hide organization number. I don't use a DUNS number. I want to move search name to the front. Again, I don't have to really know anything about this. I have to be techie at all. I can just grab these fields and drag and drop them where I want to. And then I can close that. Let's say there's even, oops, I didn't mean to close that. There's even fast tabs that I don't want. So I click the hide tool, say, we don't work with payment defaults. Look at that one. Look at that one. That one's grayed out when I go into hide, and it has a lock next to it. When you see anything with a lock next to it, it says you can't do that current action on this field. There's a mandatory field in that fast tab for data entry. So we're not going to let you hide this. And we would let you do that in the past. You could hide this fast tab, and then probably take you an hour or so to figure out what's going on when you can't save a record. So we're going to prevent you from doing that. But for example, if you don't use sales order defaults, you can just hide those fast tabs. Or you can move fast tabs in a different order. See, that one just, if I want to move sales demographics to the top with the move tool.
So let's say you have multiple data sources in this form.
Yep.
Can you still move them around, mix and match?
The question, I'm going to take money from you because I was avoiding. So the question, I'll get to you in a second. The question is, we have data sources that are mixed and matched in the form. Data source 1, data source 2, data source 3. And am I going to let you take a field from data source 3 up to data source 1? Right now, the answer is no. We're very parental about that. We're not letting you do that because it's not going to be a great experience for you. Where I could be tabbing, and all of a sudden I'm tabbing, it says, I need to do a save. And it could repeatedly throw that, I need to do a save in front of you through no fault of your own. Now, we appreciate that we don't know all, and there may be exceptions to the rule. So what we're doing in the future is, instead of absolutely not letting you do it, we're going to warn you. We're going to give you, we're going to drag, this is my dream anyway, we're going to start the drag, and we're going to give you drop targets. Saying, okay, these are all targets for the same data source, go ahead and move it in there. If you try to move it someplace else, we're going to warn you. I say, all right, we told you, but we're going to let you do it. As a developer, I fully believe in giving you the power to shoot yourself in the foot if that's what you want, because there's going to be scenarios where it just makes sense that we don't understand. There's a question way in back. Nope, okay. Let's see. I want to leave time for questions, but I also want to show you, for those of you who've actually seen this before, I got one more thing to show you, and that is the personalization. This is the new thing, and it's not even this. If my manager saw this, he'd be going ballistic right now, but I don't care, because it's so cool. Because this is something that's not done. It's partially checked in, only partially working, but you get to see it because I want to show it to you. So if you've seen personalization management before, you have the ability to turn off personalization. This form is for the admin. It says no personalizations. Turn them off. Do that here. That's the global kill switch. It doesn't delete anything. If somebody had personalized something, it doesn't delete it. It just doesn't show it anymore. If you enable it, then their personalization comes back. Sometimes that's useful if you're having a problem. You call Microsoft and you're trying to talk to the Microsoft person and you can't find a field. Turn off personalizations. Then you can talk to somebody who's looking at a different screen. And of course, there is the nuclear option where you can blow away all personalizations as an admin. And this is the thing we had before where you would manage per user, where you decide as an admin who gets a personalization. You created it, somebody else created it, but you want to share. Unfortunately, you'd have to pick a user, import, pick a user, import, pick a user, import. Obviously, that's not optimal, but we had very tight deadlines. That's what we got away with. But now I'm happy to say that we now have the global import where you will filter. Here's a list of all users in the system. You can pick a user by role. Like here are all your accountants. If I can click. And those are all the ones in the accountant role. And you can import for that group of people or a member of that group or none of the roles. Just pick the people individually. And there's going to be another tab here, which is being worked on right now for Update 5, that says, okay, I want to take away personalizations from groups of people. Those are the two big enhancements from personalization. For whatever reason, I have to end with PowerPoint, so let's fire it back up again. Okay, this slide again is not what I wanted to show you. Okay, so the goal here was to go through some of the fundamentals and talk about where we came from, why we got there, some of the high-level architecture, some of the high-level concepts about navigation, interaction with messaging, personalization, some of the things that are very common to everything you do and may not have seen it before. So that was the goal here, and that's what we covered. So I want to reiterate how important you are to us, how appreciative we are that you came, and there's my contact info. I want to hear from you. I want to learn what we're doing wrong. I want to hear the questions about, personalization is fine, but we have problems with upgrades. Stuff like that. We have a database where we have future deliverables. When you give me that feedback, what I do is I link your feedback to that deliverable. When time comes for us to decide what comes next, we talk about all the things that you guys are telling us. And the best way is just send me an email and we'll get it covered. Yes, sir.
How is that personalization data stored? It's in the database?
Uh-huh.
Multiple tables or a single table?
Uh-huh. So, as a developer, you should know this. We made it extensible so you don't have to know or care about the database. But it is a key value model. So if you wanted to have your own control on there and you wanted it to be personalizable, you store it in our database too. You give it a key value. And then a personalization value. It could be, something binary if you want to. And then we'll store it with the form, and we'll bring it back with the form, and you just play along with it if that's what you're getting at. But I wouldn't look too much at the tables because we reserve the right to mess with that stuff. But you can integrate it with a key value pair. And the XML document that comes out, you can't mess with that either. You can read it, but a lot of that is encrypted. Yes, sir.
What about the alert configuration field by field?
About what configuration field by field?
The alert configuration, where is it?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Does anybody understand what configuration field by field? Oh, alerts on fields. Alerts. Okay. So in 2012, 2009, you could set an alert so if somebody did something to that field, you'd be notified, or if a value changed, you'd be notified. That's functionality that's still being worked on. It has not made it yet into operations. I just was in a meeting about that last week. It's something we're working on. Yes?
Is that all alerts or just field level alerts?
You mean like workflow alerts?
Record creation alerts?
That all falls into one bucket of alerts. Yep, that's not available yet. But we hear that a lot, and I'm hearing it again. So send me an email about that, and I'll put that on the list. Yes, sir?
You can make workspaces that are personalized.
Yes. You can make your own workspace. If you guys want to hang for a minute, I can show you that real quick.
But can you also import those and use that new?
Yep. So what I didn't show you was the ability to create your own workspace due to time constraints. But if you come to the dashboard by going home, and you right-click and you say personalize, And then you'll see this little button right here that says Add a Workspace. You click Add a Workspace, and on the bottom here, we now have a workspace called My Workspace 1, and you can personalize that. And you can say New Workspace. And then I click that. Now it's just like a workspace. I can go to any other form. I can start adding tiles here. I can add lists here. I can add links here. I can put Power BI tiles on here. It's your own blank workspace, and do what you want to.
The question was, with update 5, will you be able to publish those to like a group of users so that
Yes. Yep. The question is, with update 5, will I be able to publish that to a group of users? And the answer is yes. It's just a form. Yes.
The question is related to architecture.
Yep.
When Microsoft ships the product out of the box, why does APIs are not enabled or it's not available for system integrators or SIs to use like out of the box APIs to integrate with 3PL or even e-commerce? It looks like we need to do customization in order to integrate, and it's kind of becoming hard.
So which specific APIs are not available? The question is, when you're trying to integrate with Dynamics, some of the APIs are not available.
I mean, I understand from my 3 days of learning, or 2 days.
Okay.
I think, I mean, when you ship the product, I think my understanding is it should be a thumb rule of like 70% out of the box, especially to reduce the go-to-market time to 70% out of the box and do 30% customization to meet your business needs. But it looks like all the entities like sales order creation, purchase order creation, we have to customize it in order to expose to integrate with
I don't have a good answer for you. I would talk to somebody from the Visual Studio Group, like a Peter Villitson or Robert Bodway. I know Peter actually has a session coming up next. If you look in there, you can catch him in that. He may be even talking about something like that. One more thing I wanted to get to, and then I'll stay late and take your questions. I just want to do one more thing. I just want to ask you to, I want to finish saying thank you. There's some links in this deck to some of the things we talked about, and I'll send you the deck. I'll make sure it's available on the download, where I talk about personalization. We talked about extensible controls. There's a user experience video where you can see some of these demos. I'm going to update the user experience video to include the demos that we did today, the action and screen shortcuts we talked about, and of course messaging. I'll let you finish taking your pictures.
How soon do these get posted?
I know less about this conference than that chair does right there. So I imagine there's not a quick time frame. If you need it immediately, send me an email. I'll send it to you. Please fill out your survey, and here's the link for the session materials. But like I said, I have no idea how frequently that is. I'll make an effort to get it up there tonight. If it doesn't show tonight, give me a day. Otherwise, send me an email and I'll send it to you. Question?
you transfer the personalizations across environments? So I set them up in test and then import them in production?
Yes. That's an outstanding question, and I had to think for a minute where we landed on it because we were very careful about privacy and security, and we landed in a place where we're going to allow you to do that. So that's a very common thing where you want to set it up in Sandbox and do a test. So here's the deal. We're out of time. I'm going to say thank you, allow you to go on your way, but I'll stay here as long as you want to answer your questions. So thank you for coming, and have a great rest of the conference.